Chiron here with the forecast of April 8th, 2024. As you undoubtedly know, this is the week of the solar eclipse. It's happening at 19 degrees of Aries, and it happens on Monday, April 8th. So this is a big time. The eclipse actually cuts across the United States. It goes through northern New York State up in New England, and it also goes down, I think, Texas up through the middle of the country, cutting through Cleveland, Akron, Ohio. You'll be getting the eclipse totality, and everybody's very excited about this. This is terrific. There's many warnings not to look at the eclipse, which is, it's good advice. Don't look at the eclipse without the proper eye things, and make sure you get real good eye things and not the kind of crappy ones that people are selling, because it's, they just want to make a couple of bucks, but they don't really know what they're doing. And I still wouldn't look at it for that long or anything like that, but it's not really any more dangerous than it is to look at the sun on any other day. It's just a little bit more tempting because the sun is covered up. Around here, everybody is really freaked out about it. We have signs up on the highways, 4/8 solar eclipse, use mass transit. I suppose because people will be driving to see the eclipse. I will be driving to see the eclipse, but I've kind of hatched my own plan to make it a little bit less of a getting stuck in traffic situation. It's a fairly elaborate and costly plan, I got to admit. But seeing a solar eclipse, these things don't come around too much, and I'm very much looking forward to I want to get into the path of totality. So I'm getting my eclipse glasses, and I'm all set up for it. Now, astrologically, what do we have to say about this eclipse? It's at 19 degrees of Aries. One thing that really strikes me about this, that I don't know much about Chiron. You know that I am not the Chiron practor. I don't really understand what Chiron is about, and in that I am pretty much in the same camp with pretty much every other astrologer, including those who write books and give lectures on the topic. We usually wind up seeing people saying, well, Chiron was discovered in 1977 and we still don't know much about it. I think we are pretty much at the anniversary. I should really have looked this up beforehand, but I'm not gonna. We might very well be at the anniversary of Chiron, like the Chiron return of its discovery. Anyway, Chiron is in a partile, it's less than 1 degree, is in a partile, actually 5 minutes of arc conjunction with the sun and moon at this eclipse. So whatever it is that Chiron happens to stand for and mean, boy, oh boy, this may be that might be the eclipse right here. We might actually come to understand what Chiron is all about. Chiron in Aries seems to be about having a sense of self-doubt and a sense of, Aries is the energy of getting into the game. Chiron in Aries seems to be like, oh, can I get in the game? But then again, not everybody born in the 70s has that particular thing, so I don't know. Anyways, we're liable to find out with this solar eclipse conjunct Chiron. I'm telling you this right now, and you can remember it or you can forget it. If you forget it and something happens, I'll remind you about it. If not, I'll let it go. This eclipse gets triggered on May 26th when Mars goes over the eclipse degree. And it's very, very likely that it's on May 26th that something's going to happen. In the meantime, we all feel that eclipse energy, that sort of implosive energy that kind of pulls us inwards. All right. It's an intense time. The eclipse is an intense time, and folks are likely to be a little wound up on the eclipse. It doesn't pop like the lunar eclipse we had a couple of weeks ago on the 25th of March, but it is nonetheless the kind of tense energy that will get some folks to be a little bit, crabby and stuff like that. It shouldn't be a big deal for most of us, but you got to watch out. It's a month of that. Then we have the Later on in the month, we're going to have the Scorpio full moon. That's a shit show always in itself. And then not necessarily, not really, but just, it's like you know. And then we have the Pluto station at the end of the month. So we have a lot of this kind of like intensity, intensity, intensity. Very Plutonian month. April, the flowers, the springtime. Not that we're really experiencing that here in the Northeast, but the flowers, the springtime, we've got cold and damp and rainy and windy and stuff like that over here. I digress. That's not everybody's story. But anyways, April, not necessarily feeling all that. It's a little bit like Halloween in April, if you want to know the celestial vibe. I like that. Halloween in April. Anyway, that's a little bit the celestial vibe, and the solar eclipse is, it's part of it. It's part of it. Mercury's retrograde, right? So that's, talk about, used mass transit. And then at midweek, we have this really, let's call it interesting aspect. We have Mars conjunct Saturn. This happens on Wednesday. So this is coloring the entire week. The eclipse kind of makes us edgy and ready to do something. It's in Aries, especially because it's in Aries. So it gives us a little bit extra, like we want to do something. And yet, it's a new moon, so the energy is a little bit low. Mercury is retrograde, which, it's in Aries also. It's not necessarily slowing things down all that much, but, it's Mercury's retrograde. It's a little bit of a thing. And then Mars meets with Saturn. Now, when Mars meets with Saturn, I should mention, by the way, this is a north node eclipse. The sun and the moon will meet near the north node of the moon, not the south node of the moon. And it does indeed show us a little bit more about where we should be heading towards, as opposed to what we should be moving away from. So kind of lock that in the recesses of your mind. So Mars meets with Saturn at midweek. So when Mars meets with Saturn, the action principle and restrictions and limitations and structure come together. And it's a time when we say, don't multitask, tackle one thing at a time. You may not make that much progress, but you're better off putting out effort, all of that stuff. This is Mars conjunct Saturn. Mars conjunct Saturn in Pisces is an interesting question, though, because Pisces is the dual sign, and it's a little slippery. We're kind of incited to multitask, to do more than one thing at a time. And it would be interesting to see how this works out. Anyway, my guess is that your strategy for this week is to be take one thing at a time. Resist the urge to multitask. If you've got to handle a couple of things, try to do them one at a time. So what you want to do this week is avoid multitasking as much as possible. Mars in Pisces is probably pretty good at it, generally speaking. But with the meeting with Saturn, it's like you could just wind up juggling too many things at once. And that's not ideal, obviously. So this is a time to be a little bit more take things one step at a time. We're just coming out of the new moon. It may be an eclipse. It may be a big deal because it's an eclipse, but it's a new moon. So we're going to wait a little bit for the energy to build, right? We're going to give a little time for the energy to build. We have Mars conjunct Saturn. That's telling us to slow down. Don't push too hard on the accelerator this week. Mercury's retrograde, another little bit of a caution-y type of thing. So it's not a bad energy. Don't go hide under your bed. Forget about it. Not that at all. But deal with things a little bit at a time. Take things step by step this week. That's the way to get the most out of this week, rather than adding it all together and seeing how much you can do or anything like that. That's the energy isn't really there for that. It's fine. It's fine. It's not a bad week. It's not a bad week. The moon, after meeting with the sun in Aries, is going to go through Taurus through the midweek period of time, that should be lovely, actually. We'll meet with Jupiter and then Uranus, so it's got a little bit of fresh air kind of feeling to it. And by the weekend, looking to head into Gemini and eventually the sign of Cancer. The big advantage to this is that the moon starts to pull away from the other planets and get a little bit of perspective on things. And that's what we're typically lacking during the winter months of the 2020s, is because we have everything bundled together. I'll put the video through over here so you can see it. We have everything bundled together in the sky, and so we have this sort of intense cauldron of energy, but we don't have much perspective. And as the moon pulls away, goes through Gemini, good sign for perspective, and then into Cancer, okay, for perspective, and then into Leo, it's going to be opposite Pluto and Aquarius. As the moon moves forward and gets some distance from the other planets, we start to get a little bit of perspective reflected back to us, which we will appreciate right up until about the full moon in Scorpio on the 23rd. But it's certainly, as we get out of, as we get towards the back end of this week and get ready for our forecast for April 15th, then we are starting to get a little bit of perspective on things. We can start to look back over the last several weeks, maybe going back as far as the last month, and start to see what all of those events that happened, particularly, I want to say particularly since the lunar eclipse on March 25th, get a sort of a sense of what it's been all about. What it's all about. Get a little bit more realistic assessment of some of the things that have happened over the course of the last few weeks. And then the full moon in Scorpio, probably have to wait a little tiny bit to get the full perspective on things. We may have to wait until deeper in the month, but you can start to get a little perspective this week, particularly towards the weekend. A little bit of a chance to see what it is that's been happening. You've been busy, stuff has been going on, that changes are in the works. You don't really know what it's about. Well, maybe you find out.